Yeah, yeah, look. Hey man, you know what it is. That right. Yeah. Driven by music DNT. Like it. Yeah. Like it. Yeah. Like it. Yeah. I was feeling suicidal, looking for the answers, couldn't find them in the Bible. Yeah, yeah. But you didn't want to know that, cause all my pictures tell you that I'm good. That's a Kodak moment. Yeah. But my real ones got me. I would never fold out, that's what the origami. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Driven, that's the logo. I can't tell you I won't quit, but you already know though, man. You know though, man. You know though, man. You know what it is. I'm the only one bringing championship to the crib. Everybody else, you know, they're trying to leave out the city, but I move back so I can take it over like get it. Building empire take time, that's why I'm patient for this. This might not make radio, cause there ain't no station for this. Greener make some people change up on you out of the blue. Damn, I thought you was my dog, I did not have a clue. Look, I know what these people want, so I just give them what they need. And looking at it from your eyes, it must be devastating. But I got so much work to do, and I ain't got no time for you. And looking at my future goals, and it was so amazing. Amen. Yeah. And they gon' hate this one. Man, it took me like I must have finally make this one. I'm moving on, cause victory is mine, my son. It's Type T and High Ride, Bad Boys, Volume 1. What's up? Yeah. I was feeling suicidal, looking for the answers, couldn't find them in the Bible. Yeah, yeah. But you didn't want to know that, cause all my pictures tell you that I'm good. That's a Kodak moment, yeah. But my real ones got me. I would never fold out, that's what the origami. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Driven, that's the logo. I can tell you I won't quit, but you already know though. Look, I'm the greatest, it ain't up for discussion. If we talking the temptation, boy, then I'm David Ruffin. Man, we did it on our own, nobody gave us nothing. And if your grind don't match your rhyme, then the deuces I'm chucking for real. Look, and ain't nobody does it like I did it. Point the biggest skeptic out, even he gotta admit it. Nothing you say can bother me, cause I'm my biggest critic. 2020's the vision, and I see it very, very look. Man, I'm murder beast, homicide, rules I do not abide. Word to Slippy J, I was raised different. And I got plenty problem 99, but they don't revolve around you. Why me do it? I don't need permission. And they gon' hate this one. Man, it took me like 9 months to finally make this one. I'm moving on, cause victory is mine, my son. It's Type T and Hot Rod, Bad Boys, Volume 1. What's up? I was feeling suicidal, looking for the answers, couldn't find them in the Bible. Yeah, yeah. But you didn't want to know that, cause all my pictures tell you that I'm good. That's a Kodak moment, yeah. But my real ones got me. I would never fold out, that's what the origami. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Driven, that's the logo. I can tell you I won't quit, but you already know the look. Yeah, yeah. Look, hey man, you know though, man. You know what it is. That right. Yeah. Driven by music DNT. Like it. Yeah. Like it. Yeah. Like it. Yeah. I was feeling suicidal, looking for the answers, couldn't find them in the Bible. Yeah, yeah. But you didn't want to know that, cause all my pictures tell you that I'm good. That's a Kodak moment, yeah. But my real ones got me. I would never fold out, that's what the origami. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Driven, that's the logo. I can tell you I won't quit, but you already know though, man. You know though, man. You know though, man. You know what it is. I'm the only one bringing championship to the crib. Everybody else, you know, they're trying to leave out the city, but I move back so I can take it over like get it. Building empire take time, that's why I'm patient for this. This might not make radio, cause there ain't no station for this. Greener make some people change up on you out of the blue. Damn, I thought you was my dog, I did not have a clue. Look, I know what these people want, so I just give them what they need. And looking at it from your eyes, it must be devastating. But I got so much work to do, and I ain't got no time for you. And looking at my future goals, and it was so amazing. Amen. Yeah. And they gon' hate this one. Man, it took me like 9 months to finally make
Good evening, or I sound like the Truman Show. I should say good afternoon, good evening, and good night. For those who have never seen the Truman Show, you should check that out with Jim Carrey. But this is Pastor Earle Fisher, and I am proud to be the pastor of the Blackest Church in Memphis and Shelby County, Abyssinian Missionary Baptist Church. And it is from that Facebook page that we are streaming this evening. We are at it once again. This is Ask the Black Preacher, and so this is where we come together and dialogue about all things social justice, religion, faith, spirituality, so on and so forth. I appreciate everybody who's tuning in. I'm going to ask you to share this so that we can have a righteous and rigorous dialogue and discussion about whatever it is you want to talk about. I'm also asking everyone to submit their questions in the comment section. I will try to read through them and respond to them. Remember, no question is off limits. Let me do as I tend to do, or at least try to do every time we gather together. Let me salute and honor a colleague and compadre of mine who inspired Ask the Black Preacher, and that is the Reverend Dr. Andre E. Johnson, who is the senior pastor of Gifts of Life Ministries in Memphis, Tennessee, in the Raleigh-Fraser area, and he is also associate professor of communication at the University of Memphis. It was Dr. Johnson who used to do Ask the Pastor with his congregation at G Life, and I thought about that, and I thought it was a great thing, but I wanted to do something a little bit different, and so we ended up trying to take Ask the Black Preacher to different venues around the city of Memphis, and it was well received for several seasons, if you will. And so when the pandemic hit, we, as a leadership team of Abyssinian, started to talk about ways to engage people beyond Sunday. And for years, let me add this, and I hadn't added this in the sessions past, I used to do a midweek seminar every Wednesday at Abyssinian. And the seminar was simply a Bible study of sorts, but being that my approach to religion and theology is to instruct and to teach, since I teach religion and philosophy, or religion and theology and religious studies at the collegiate level, I would always invite my parishioners out. We would have a conversation as if we were in a classroom setting. So this in many ways aims to supplement that. Hey, Denise, and hey, Brother Michael, and hey, Derek, and hey, Carlos. Hey, Reverend Regina. So this seeks to accomplish some of the same things that a midweek Bible study would accomplish. Hey, Sister Karen. So if you've ever had questions about the Bible or religion or faith or something like that that you wanted to ask the preacher, please feel free to ask me. Beyond that, I hope and pray that everybody's doing well. Obviously, this COVID-19 pandemic continues to ravage communities of color, especially black communities like the one in Memphis and Shelby County. And so I hope that everybody that is out there is doing well and doing fine. Also hope that you and your family have access to the medical and the economic resources that you need. If not, please do try to reach out to these organizations and institutions, and even the individuals that you think can help, and hopefully we can find the help that you need. So I always ask that people would salute and support the house that houses Ask the Black Preacher. So when we were out in the community, if we were at a community venue, I would ask people to make donations to that organization or institution. And the same is true now that we are on this Abyssinian Missionary Baptist Church Facebook page. Please take a minute, scroll through the comment sections, click the PayPal link, and make a donation to Abyssinian Missionary Baptist Church so you can help us to continue to reach more people and do more work in the Whitehaven community and beyond. So beyond that, I am always one who says I am a black preacher, and so I don't speak for all black preachers because we are not monolithic, but I do speak as a black preacher that is unapologetically committed to social justice and black liberation. So with that being said, I hope and pray that you have brought your questions with you. Hey, Sandra, I hope that you have brought your questions with you, because I am looking forward to answering them. The past couple of weeks, I have done stuff that I just felt like was on my mind and on my heart. I don't want to necessarily do that again this week, but if I don't see any questions in the queue in the next few seconds, I will have no other choice if we're going to engage in dialogue and discussion but to do that. So I hope again that you all would find time to ask some questions. I'm trying to also manage my personal Facebook page and do a watch party. So hopefully I can get that up and going. And I would ask you to do the same. If you have a moment, won't you please be so kind as to start a watch party on your page and ask people to chime in. And obviously, if they ask a question on your page, that does not necessarily mean that I would be able to see it. So what I would need you to do is type the questions that you see people asking on your page, or at least, yeah, because I get to announce them from mine, but you would have to type them from yours. So I'm not sure how many people have followed the landscape of the discussion around access to economic and medical resources in communities of color around the country in response to COVID-19. Please allow me a moment as I await questions to share with you some of what I have been trying to discuss and keep front and center. Y'all know several weeks ago, most of the states and most of the cities as a byproduct were unwilling or unable to submit or disaggregate, which means to break down data of who was being infected and who was being tested, who was being cured, who was dying from COVID-19 along racial lines. So several weeks ago, based upon some articles that I had read and some that were sent to me, I ended up doing an interview with Fox 13 saying that I was concerned that communities of color that disproportionately suffer from health disparities would be unable to get access to the type of medical and economic resources that we needed, and that it was necessary for the Shelby County Health Department, if you're in the Memphis area, or other departments, state departments and federal departments, to disaggregate the data by race so we would know exactly where the resources need to go. Let me tell you again why I think that was and continues to be so important, and that is because so many times the argument is that we are data-driven. We do data-driven analysis and data-driven this and data-driven that. Well, if the data itself does not provide enough detail to speak to the uniqueness or the specificity of the problem, what ends up happening is we fall into default mode. Default mode in the yet-to-be United States of America is to make sure you look out for the richest and the whitest, and make sure you abandon and neglect the poorest and the blackest. And so it was not hard to see that was coming down the pike. Luckily, I guess we could say, or as a byproduct of the efforts and organizations of people of goodwill and people of color, what ended up happening was we had governmental entities begin to release bits and pieces of the data by along racial lines. That's when you started to see nationally and locally people talk about the disparity of the number of people who were having access to tests, the number of people who were getting infected, and the number of people that was dying. And in just about every instance, the number of people who was getting access to testing were more affluent and more white. The number of people who were being hardest hit by this were people of color, especially black folks, who were being infected at higher rates and dying at higher rates. If you did not get a chance, allow me to refer some of us, especially if you are part of the faith community, to the press conference that the Repairs of the Breach and the Poor People's Campaign, headed by Bishop Dr. William Barber, put on today. I think it was around 12 noon. It was in partnership with the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. They got a chance to do a press conference, a virtual press conference, where they highlighted some of those disparities and what it looks like for real people on the ground. I'm still reeling from the riveting testimony of people like Reverend Tracy Blackman out of St. Louis, Missouri, who talked about even some of her parishioners being victims of COVID-19 and dying after having been neglected by the medical personnel in the area. I know that my dear auntie, as I call her, Dr. Gina M. Stewart, who is a pastor of Christ Missionary Baptist Church in South Memphis, was talking about how this was reeling in the South Memphis community and what was needed and necessary there. Obviously, you had Dr. Bishop Barber out of North Carolina, who made some wonderful comments. I think that Alvin O'Neill Jackson, Dr. Alvin O'Neill Jackson, the former pastor of Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church in Memphis, Tennessee, who is currently in Jacksonville, Florida, was helping to organize and moderate some of that stuff. So if you get a chance, go to the Solar Black Preaching group page or Repairs of the Breach page, the Poor People's Campaign page. You should be able to see all of that there. So long story less long, as my brother Bishop Andre Beatty would say, it is necessary for us to level the medical and economic resources in the communities that need them the most. Here is my reluctant prediction at this point. As we see governmental figures and agencies and organizations beginning to talk about what it means to reopen the economy, or get America back going again, or get people back to work that have been quarantined or have been under the stay-at-home orders that are effective in, I believe, all 50 states right now. My concern and my reluctant prediction is that we will relax these stay-at-home requirements in different places at different times, which is probably going to mean the more white and the more affluent places will get relaxed first. At the same time, or not long after, there probably will be some spikes in infection, and it would probably be blamed on poorer black communities and individuals who, quote unquote, didn't follow through with the stay-at-home orders. The orders for quarantine are going to be implemented more aggressively in black and brown communities, and we'll have to raise more hell for black people to be treated with the same level of rights and privileges as other people around the country. So I pray that I'm wrong about that up to this point. And I was actually on BBC World News last night on the radio. Well, it was last night in Memphis and Shelby County. It was actually early morning there. I was on the radio show, the BBC World News morning Newsday Radio, I think is what it's called. And I got a chance to talk about how COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted Memphis and Shelby County. So, get a chance to check some of that stuff out. Keep your eyes open. Hey, Michael Adrian Davis, and hey, Dominique, and hey, Pastor Joplin, and hey, Dr. Martha Simmons, and hey, Tamika Turner, and Alvin Crook, and Donna, and Darius, and all of you wonderful people. I hope that you all will share this and submit any questions that you may have. Donna Van Hook on my personal watch party says that, so black folks are disproportionately dying, white folks out here marching to open the state. Yes, that's the case. And I figured that it was on, hey, Sister Pearl, it was only a matter of time before, these whole safer at home acts started to frustrate white people who are more accustomed to moving around at their leisure and at their privilege. Brother Carlos says bird flu, swine flu, this flu, which may be the bat flu he mentions, and that's true. I think most of the scientists have suggested that this is a byproduct of bat testing in the Wuhan lab in China, if I'm not mistaken. He says these viruses start in unsanitary meat markets. Is it time to go vegan and get healthy? That's a good question, Carlos. I will say I am inclined to believe that people have been eating meat for a long time, and we did not suffer from all of these flus, and none of them seem to reach the epic of COVID-19 or the coronavirus. And I have argued for weeks that it reached this level because of inadequate and incompetent and insensitive leadership at the highest office of the land. And it is not just in the highest office of the land. There are other offices that are local, state, county, so on and so forth. I do think that we have to be mindful of our dietary habits and how sanitary or unsanitary it may be. I don't think that necessarily means we need to go vegan per se. Again, human beings have existed on Earth for a long time. I wonder if the swine flu, you did say the swine flu. So was the swine flu a byproduct of? Give me some information, Carlos, that may help me be more informed about this. Which pig, swine, duh. Okay. Well, I don't know, man. Cow flu. So maybe we don't eat bird. We don't eat pig. We eat beef until we find. No, I mean, at the end of the day, I think we are human beings that have fragile and fallible bodies. And at the end of the day, Sister Tasha, at the end of the day, y'all, hey, we are going to have to make conscious decisions to improve the quality of our life as much as possible, but also secure our individual freedoms as long as they don't infringe on the freedoms of other people. So, Carlos, I hear you. He says give up meat, and it would also cut down on diabetes, obesity, which kills too many folks. I think that's a fair argument, and we probably have to think through some more on how to implement that and still allow people to have freedom in terms of their personal choices about what they want to eat. My cousin, Denise's cousin, Tiffany Shaw, says she works in a medical clinic that services the Memphis area, and they haven't denied anyone testing. That's good, Tiffany. What I would ask, thanks for sharing, Pastor Joplin, and hey, everybody who is logging on now, Kermit and Frank and Kayla and all of y'all. Don't laugh at me, Frank, about the cow flu. But Tiffany, what I would ask is, I understand, and it's good news that no one was denied any testing. The way that the testing availability has been communicated by most outlets that I have seen started off being you could only be tested if you had an appointment or a referral from your primary care physician. This is why when the hot spots first popped up on the map in Shelby County, in my argument, and I made this argument on several news stations, it did not reflect adequately the number of infections. What it reflected was where people had access to testing because they had access to decent health care. So it started with you had to have a primary care physician or some referral. Then it went to you had to be showing symptoms. And then there was discussion about people who were asymptomatic. Obviously testing options have increased because there are even different forms of testing now. Remember when we first got to test in Memphis and Shelby County, there was even no place that they could send the results locally. They had to send it to Nashville and had a state do the test and then come back and send the results back. That has improved. So now people are getting tests locally and getting them results much faster. And then people started saying that you did have to have an appointment, but you didn't have to have insurance. You can go to certain places in Memphis and Shelby County like Christ Community Health Center. Earlier this week, they started talking about everybody could get tested if they wanted to get tested now. And there would be mobile units that would be rolling through lower income neighborhoods. I don't know where that stands. I'll have to follow up on that. But obviously, I think y'all would see that the point is until we can get a hold, and you're hearing more and more people say this now. I've been trying to say this for weeks. Until we can get a better grasp on testing access, we really won't have a solid grasp on the number of infections, which means we also won't be able to treat the infected well enough to minimize deaths and the spread of the virus. It starts with testing. I heard people on the press conference that I mentioned earlier, Samuel Dewitt Proctor, the Poor People's Campaign, and the Repairs of the Breach press conference, Dr. Freddie Haynes and others make this reference. Until we get adequate testing, and that testing has to be leveraged in poor and black communities where people are disproportionately impacted by health disparities. Until we do that, in all likelihood, hey Bree, in all likelihood, hey Dr. Tanya Lyons, and hey Kendall, until we do that, we'll be what's the old adage? We'll be sowing into the wind because we won't know exactly how many people are infected and how to best stop the spread. Jacaranda, I hope I'm pronouncing this properly. If I'm not, please charge it to my head, not my heart. Type it in the comment section and correct me on how to pronounce it. It says Bill Gates has a patent on COVID-19. This gives me a chance to talk about something. Look, there are reports out that talk about the development. I was watching on Netflix, if you haven't seen Pandemic, it is a series about the spread of viruses swine flu, H1N1, bird flu. I'm thinking about the Spanish flu in 1918, but no, not that one. And then obviously the development of this coronavirus and stuff like that. Watch it. I'm not one to buy into the conspiracy that this is manufactured to, do population control or genocide. I'm not persuaded. Okay, you got to give me some more information. Other than even if Bill Gates has the patent and all of that other stuff, there are ways to study conspiracies, if you will, or to study allegations so that they could be proven or disproven. And so I said this before, I'm going to say it again. I'm not convinced that the way we going to crack the conspiracy cold case is by what we share in our Facebook inbox or some that was a YouTube clip. Okay. There are highly trained professionals. I'm talking about medical professionals, statisticians, academicians, epidemiologists. There are people out here who study this stuff. And I'm talking about got a whole lot more knowledge about it than you or I do. Okay? I think that they know how, unless we're going to say all of these people are coordinated. All of the statisticians out there, all of the epidemiologists out there, all of the people who study pandemics, all of the people who study history. Look, we know I've been citing or highlighting and mentioning and recommending a million times. Riley, I'm finna say something about the chemical. Look, I've been talking about Karen Washington's book, Medical Apartheid. We know that the human genome experiment with Henrietta Lacks is a real thing. We know this. We know that the Tuskegee experiment is a real thing. We also know that at that time, there were scholars that was documenting that stuff. And that the field of medicine at the time was so, it was rooted in pseudoscience is the term. Pseudoscience. So, drapetomania and all this other stuff, all of the sociologists and all of these folks. I mean, yes, they had some motivations that I'm not saying have been eradicated, but I'm saying I'm not persuaded yet. I'm not even, okay, so I'm not ruling it out. It could be chemical warfare. And I think that's more of a legitimate argument than this idea of genocide or something like that. It was a plan to do something. It kind of sort of went awry, or, China infected X number of people, sent them over this way, all this other stuff. I'm going to wait, because what critical thinking as a discipline has taught me is to suspend my judgment until I have enough concrete evidence to draw the most faithful conclusion. So I still got time. Meanwhile, outside of the conspiracies or things like that, I want to do what I can to make sure that my people have access to testing and, medical resources and economic resources. But I do understand that particular argument. Hey, Pastor Scott, and hey, Darren, hey, Dominique, hey, Ursula. I do understand that argument. Hey, Bridget, hey, Siju. Siju is the one, my dear brother, Siju Walter Crawford, he would be the one to talk about some of these, hey, Pastor Hutch, good, Siju. He said he getting his questions together. Go ahead, get them together. Hey, June and Stan, and there's a lot of y'all on here. So thank everybody for tuning in. I deeply appreciate this. Carlos, I'm going to come back to some of your comments. I want to try to get some other voices mentioned out here. Tasha Miles Stewart, my dear sister, says that our leadership at the top is absolute trash. Amen. She says she went to an urgent care clinic 2 weeks ago in the Cordova area. They denied her any treatment because the doctor didn't want to possibly expose herself. Which goes back to we don't have a medical infrastructure that has sufficient equipment, in part because we don't have sufficient funding. And guess why? I said this on the BBC World News show last night that, I'll go back to that Joplin. Yes. But I said this on the BBC World News show last night. Y'all do know Tennessee had an opportunity to expand Medicaid, which would have provided more resources. However, it was denied during the previous governmental administration, in large part because, if not solely because, it was associated with the first black president. Prove me wrong. Tiffany, I see your comment. I'm going to come to it in just a second. Sister Bonnie Chilster says, in parking lots of Walmart, CVS, Target, total of 6 in the country with 0 at Target. Clarify what that meant, Sister Bonnie. Clarify what that meant. Lisa Bennett says, 1 new testing center will be open in Fraser. However, the local leaders still do not have a plan regarding lack of transportation to testing sites as MATA or the Memphis Area Transit Authority is inadequate. Hey, Georgie Mosley, thank you for chiming in. Lisa, I want to make sure that you aren't conflating the treatment facility that is being proposed as like an overflow hospital for people who are moderately dealing with COVID-19, not people who are critical, but mildly. That is being proposed. No, that's not Fraser. I'm sorry. You're right. Fraser. It is going to be new testing center open in Fraser. I was thinking about the center it's a North Memphis-ish area, and they were talking about in the shopping center retrofitting one of the old places to make it a medical unit of sorts. So yes. Hey, Mike Dale, what's up, brother? Hey, everybody. I think there were some more questions I want to try to catch up to. Carlos, I see your comments too. Tiffany, I see your commentary. Okay. Maybe I got a minute. I'll go through some of this. But let me also say, this is why I feel like, since this is on the Abyssinian site, since this is Ask the Black Preacher, I want to talk about how crucial like these details are when people of faith start talking about what it means to draw conclusions. Like, we can draw conclusions based upon faith, things that we hope for. The New Testament scripture says faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, which implies it's not necessary to have faith if indeed you can prove something. Okay, so there are things scientifically, hello somebody, that we can prove. Now, if we can prove it scientifically, maybe our best bet is not to use the language or the litmus test of faith. Maybe our best bet is to do the scientific research, or at least uncover the scientific research that's already out there. And then, thank you, Dominic, it was Raleigh. Raleigh Fraser is the area where, no, that's something else. I don't know. I'll get back to it. But the point that I'm making, y'all, is let's do the research and not try to lean on religion or religiosity, might be a better way to put it, to try to justify some of the claims that we make or some of the actions that we engage in. Okay? There's opportunities for us to know certain things. God has granted us the gift of knowledge and science, so we can use that knowledge and that science to obey and live what the New Testament writer said, life and that more abundantly. Okay? So hopefully that is making more sense to y'all. Hey, JD Harper, what's up, Rev? Thank you for tuning in. Hey, Sharita. Hey, Kayla. Thank y'all for tuning in. Again, I'm asking that y'all would submit questions. I'm going to read some more of the comments because I think we have a little bit more time now. Let me go back. Carlos, you had a question up here or a comment. You heard that if you're going to eat meat, stick to animals that fly or swim. Yeah, I think people would call it pescatarian. Look, at the end of the day, Carlos, I want to be very clear. I'm not in favor of bats. As a matter of fact, I will confess that this is a pejorative joke that may be insensitive. Forgive me or hold me accountable for what I'm about to say. But I was thinking when this first kicked off and they were talking about how this is associated to Chinese dietary culture, I was like, see, we used to tell them stop cooking the dogs and stuff like that. Nah, they done messed around and got all us put on punishment. Can't nobody go outside now. Okay, so hey, Sister Miriam, thanks for tuning in all the way from Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. Sister Miriam Dorsey and I have a story about the Proctor Conference, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's you, Sister Miriam. Okay. Next comment. And I'm also, Pastor Joplin, my dear brother, pastor of the Delivering Word Bible Church in Memphis, Tennessee, in the Whitehaven area. He is just commenting on my watch party, talking about how important it is or how much he appreciates us connecting reason or critical thinking and theology. He says that they go hand in hand, and yes, they do. Look, our ancestors were spiritualists. They were people who were in touch with the spirit realm, but they also knew how to think critically. Okay, look, I support and affirm mysticism and all this other stuff, but some of what we're talking about, most of what I would say we're talking about nowadays, ain't really mysticism. It's ignorance. It's lunacy, draped in religious language. Okay, so I'll give you an example. For people to suggest that God was going to take care of them, and if God wanted them to catch the coronavirus, then they would have caught it. I bet you 99% of them who said that still wear their seatbelts. They still lock their doors in the middle of the night when they go home, right? They still take their blood pressure medication if they got it. They take headache medicine, BCs or Tylenol or aspirin if they have it. Look, it's ludicrous to try to put that type of claim on a God that is logical enough to orchestrate the universe whereby there are 24 hours in every day. Okay, like, so there are certain things. It's just lunacy. It's just lunacy. It's just lunacy. It's just lunacy. And I'm tired of folks. Hey, Sister Michelle, and tell Brother Eric we say hello. Or Pastor Eric we say hello. Amber, I'm tired of the punishment too. But I'm not sure it's punishment as much as it is protection. Hey, Nick Hicks, what's up? It's not punishment. Amber, it feels that way. We do feel confined. But it's also a measure of protection, right? Like, sometimes you just have to take these measures just because they are necessary to protect you and those around you. Look, there are a lot of comments, and I want to try to get to them, but I also want to try to make sure I'm including voices who may not have commented yet. So, Carlos, I see yours, and these. I will get a chance when this is over to go back through and try to respond to as much as I possibly can. But I want y'all to know how much I appreciate this level of engagement, okay? Michael Stewart says he saw another pastor died after holding church service during quarantine. Are they being faithful or greedy? I will say this, and I've said this in a couple. I was on a panel with Sister Reach. I think it was last week. I'm pretty sure it was last week. And, you know, many of the faith leaders who were critiquing or condemning pastors who were still holding service physically with more than 10 people, or even some even with 10 people. I feel boxed in too, Amber, but we're gonna live through this. Hey, Pastor Letcher. They were talking about how preachers were doing this simply out of greed. It's more nuanced than that. It's more complex than that. I know some pastors who were doing it, and it was not because they were worried about money. They sincerely believe and have the faith that, you know, if God caused them to get sick, that they would be healed, or that they didn't want to present or project what they thought was a faithlessness, which is an ideology that many of them had been indoctrinated by or adopted. Okay, so, you know, we do need, I was having this conversation with CJ earlier. He could testify to this. I'm still waiting on your questions, Brother CJ. Hey, Pastor Marquise McPherson. We need more nuance in our analysis. Most of the things that we are trying to make straight, cut, and dry, straight left or right, top or bottom, left, you know, black or white, if you will, are not that simple. They require a little bit more nuance. So it's not just that pastors are greedy or being faithless. It's a lot of stuff. You know, for those who don't know, you know, the first time when some of the orders were starting, the social distancing recommendations were put in place, and they were talking about not having gatherings of 250 or less. People were saying that you know, they were trying to apply that to churches across the board. At Abyssinian, we never see 250 people in the sanctuary at the same time. So although I was technically out of town, I got you, Derek, with your question. I'm coming to it in just a second. Thank you. Although I was out of town, I was actually in Atlanta, and associate preacher was actually supposed to get up to preach that Sunday. I didn't follow the orders that so many people were demanding, and it was not about money. You know, it wasn't about that. Like, some of us just simply legitimately value the physical gathering together of the people of faith under a common mission and vision and cause once a week, because that's fuel for our fire for the week. Okay, so I didn't call it off the first week because the number was 250. But there would have been people saying that, you know, y'all crazy for doing. Now, ironically, we had a gas leak that day, so we had to stop the service. I was out of town. We canceled the service. And then the next Sunday, we had less than 10 people in the sanctuary because we were following the social distancing orders. Since then, most of you probably know, we are having service in the sanctuary of my living room. Me and Denise, you know, have a worship service, and we stream it here, right? But let's not do these blanket condemnations. What I was asking for several weeks, and I'm still asking now, is that people would treat this moment with a lot more compassion. Most people are just doing the best they can with what they have. And so some of us just don't have some of the same luxuries or privileges or perspectives as other people. And that's okay. What I think is not okay is for us to be so condescending or so insensitive or so conceited or so condemning of people when we don't know all of the details. So I hope that makes sense. Give me just a second, CJ. Let me try to take Derek's question. He has popped up first on the Abyssinian thread. Then I will come to yours. But again, hey, Erskine, what's up? Michigan is in the house. Ben Harvey's in the house. Pastor Jerome Blackburn, hello. Marguerite, hey. CJ, give me just a second. Derek says, why are so many church leaders upset that the church is not considered essential when so many churches don't see the essentials of the broken communities that they reside in? That's a wonderful question. And I think both parts are valuable. Number one, let me take your last part. I would agree that so many churches don't seem to see broken communities that they exist in as essential. And at the same time, there are several churches that are trying to do better by the community, or even trying to do what's right by the community as they understand it. One of the challenges that I probably won't have enough time to get into tonight, but I know some of the people who are watching this will appreciate, is we have a theology problem. I actually posted this yesterday. I said something about prophetic preaching being connected to a prophetic theology, and that what COVID-19 has exposed is that for so many of us, our theology is shallow. COVID-19 is messing up our theology. And so I think you're on to something, Derek Patterson Jr., when you talk about why churches have not done enough in communities. Part of it could be because our theology is more of a charity and individualized theology than a justice and a communal theology. It's charity, which is to say, I feel good if I give somebody $1 who is hungry. So I have helped that person out individually. I've done my charitable deed, and I consider it to be godly. Where a more prophetic theology is what Dr. King would say, if I give somebody $1, y'all call me a saint. But if I ask you why so many people in the richest country in the world need dollars, y'all will call me a communist. Okay? So the question that prophetic theology would ask is, why do so many people have so many needs? Now, this is not to suggest that charity is not valuable. But since people like to quote Dr. King, I'm going to quote something that he says that most people don't quote. He said, if justice is what's needed, charity is sin. So oftentimes you have churches that don't see the communal or the structural and the systemic impact of policies and practices that are broader than just what happens in their sanctuary or to their family members and to their parishioners. So oftentimes that's missing. Not only that, Derek, you got to think about how most 21st century churches, Abyssinian is one too, is more of a commuter-based church, which means people who go to the church or attend the church don't even live in that particular community. So it would take a concerted effort by ministerial leadership to ensure that they are advocating for and trying to implement policies and practices that would better meet the needs of that community. Now, let me deal with this essential church stuff. Churches surely seem to be essential to elected officials when they are trying to get elected to office. Not to mention, it is essential to people who value their faith enough such that their faith dictates and determines other parts and portions of their life. If you think about what Christianity is supposed to be, it's not supposed to be a doctrine. It's supposed to be a discipline. This is not the doctrine of Christ. It's supposed to be disciples of Christ, which is to suggest that you would have practices that you implement that flow out of your faith. One of the essential practices would be the gathering of ourselves together. Luke says that Jesus went to the temple as was his custom. So for a lot of people, it's legitimate for them to say that the church is essential. And I would say that it is, even when the church has not lived up to its best. The church has been, especially the black church, especially the black church. You know, I'm trying not to go there, but look, you know, if the black church ain't essential, next time one of your family members get buried and you don't go to a church, don't ask the church to host a funeral. You need to get married. Don't ask the church to host a wedding, or don't ask one of the preachers to preside over it. Come on, y'all. Come on. Now, look, I understand that we suffer from legitimate church hurt. I understand and I confess that the church has not lived up to its best self too often. Okay? I'm also suggesting that there are two relatively autonomous institutions and organizations in the black community. It's the beauty shops and the barber shops and the black churches. So, if we were to be enslaved again, you best rest assured. Well, they probably. Why you think they're bombing back? I don't want to go down that rabbit hole any longer. Hey, Reverend Freeman, and hey, Brother Vernon Whitfield, Ben Harbor's in the house. CJ, let me try to respond to your question. How does a non-critical view of the last verses in Mark impact folks' theology around miracles and healing? Right off the top of my head, I don't know what the last verses in Mark are. Let me see if I can address your question more generally. I will highlight that I appreciate you lifting up Mark, because most people who follow what is called the Markan hypothesis, Markan hypothesis, argue that Mark's gospel is the first and the oldest gospels, and the other gospels build off of Mark's gospel. So, a non-critical view of the last verses in Mark. I'm not sure what it says, but I do think that it helps us to have more of a critical view, a historical critical view, also a literary and rhetorical view. You set me up. I know you didn't intend to do this, but you probably knew that I'm about to go where I'm about to go. It is good for us to have a literary, a rhetorical, a historical, and to what degree it can be faithful to the text, a scientific analysis of all scripture. So I would say that Markan passage, if it talks about miracles and healing, it should too be looked at through the lens of a critical view, not a non-critical view. What did they mean when they said healing? What's the original Greek word for healing and miracle? Is it the same word? So for instance, most of us, if we talk about Old Testament, there's this passage in there where Moses and Aaron get an assignment from God that tells them to go to Pharaoh to tell him to let their people go. Moses says he's scared, and then he wants to be able to flex in front of Pharaoh. So God says, throw your staff down and it'll become a snake. So he goes to Pharaoh's palace. He throws the staff down. It becomes a snake. Now, some translations say, then Pharaoh called upon his magicians. Magicians. I don't even want to try to do some of the wordplay on that. But the short story, that in short, what I'm suggesting is this. If Pharaoh was telling the story, if the Egyptians was telling the story, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't call their people magicians. They would probably call their people the same thing that Moses thought his people were. So it's the perspective, but it's also about what the concrete word is. And what is that word in the historical, literary, and rhetorical context in which that word was presented? And CJ, if I'm right, which I might not be, you might be hearkening into the way, healing and deliverance is played upon in the 21st century, to which I would say this. For all of this healing and all of this deliverance that we claim we have in all of these churches, why are we still dealing with COVID-19? Ain't nobody prayed that out yet? If my people are called by my name. I'm sorry, it's a little bit cynical. So, but the fact is, I want us to use our faith as a tool of righteous living, not as a tool of religious bigotry and elitism. I want us to use our faith as a tool of righteous living, not as a tool of religious bigotry and elitism. And so sometimes, based upon our doctrines or our particular perspectives, I think we do much more of the religious elitism and bigotry than we do the righteous living. Pastor Joplin says he's referring to a non-apostolic addition at the end. The question may not be fair for this platform. It might be fair. So Brother Vinny, Pastor Vinny, what I would do is I would say I want to see you cut and paste the text. Let me read the text. See, I'm a theologian and a rhetorician. I like for texts to speak for themselves. I want to know what it says. This is why I said, so for those who are unfamiliar with this, let me just say this. The reason I would be saying something about what is the original Greek word for miracle or healing is because the New Testament was translated in what originally written in Greek. The Old Testament was originally written in Hebrew. Greeks go back and translate the Old Testament and put it in the Greek language. They call it the Septuagint, right? All of this is important because when you translate languages, in all likelihood, you lose some meaning. So translations are ultimately someone's interpretation. That's why if you go to a court of law and you don't speak the language that the law is written in, they have to call in an interpreter. And there are also words in certain language that either don't exist in other languages or don't neatly translate, which means a lot would be given in to the authority and the perspective. What's the word I'm looking for? A lot would be given to the the discretion is the term I'm looking at. The discretion of the interpreter. So, the term miracle in its original Greek language meant something. And that particular word may have had several different words that could have been translated into English, but the interpreter or the translator decided that it would be most adequately translated as miracle or healing. But it means something. There's a meaning underneath that. This is why I don't think people should play so loose and so shallow with biblical material. People are calling on biblical material in an authoritative posture, but hadn't done the critical analysis of scholarly work. Now, y'all can talk about scholars that, and some of them are elitist and highfalutin and snooty. Yes. Okay. But, at the end of the day, hey, Kiera, at the end of the day, they are helpful because they help us get a more faithful meaning of what was intended in the original moment. Yes, the preacher is right, but I won't take us down that path. I'm just saying, this is C.Jew's response. I'm just saying that folks base closer to the majority of their biblical view on verses that were likely not in the original text. Yes, that's true. I think about the end of John chapter 8, if I'm not mistaken, where Jesus writes in the sand. I think that's the passage that talks about the woman caught in the act of adultery. I think the original or the early manuscripts don't even have that in part of the story. C.J. says, secondly, in order to further disambiguate between the theological constructs that we call black and white Jesus. And if y'all hadn't heard me riff on black Jesus versus white Jesus, a glimpse of it was this charitable, individualistic Jesus, which I would assign as the white Jesus, versus the more structural, justice-oriented, prophetic Jesus, which I would assign as the black Jesus, which I believe is more true to the original Jesus of Nazareth, who Albert Clegg called the Black Messiah, who Matt King Carter called a Negro from Nazareth, who Kelly Brown Douglas calls the Black Christ, and who I call the gangster from Galilee. But in order to disambiguate between the theological constructs we call black Jesus and white Jesus, could I speak to the way Jesus is currently being evoked to either support white supremacy or black liberation during this and all socio-political situations? CJ, I'm not sure if you caught what I was trying to say earlier. I did riff on that a little bit when I was talking about people approaching faith and religion through the lens of charity and individual acts of kindness. Or even individual salvation versus. So here's one way to do it that I didn't say earlier, and hopefully this will help some of y'all too. I believe that there's a difference between our notions of salvation and God's aim for liberation. So for me, salvation is not some individualistic act that God does on each individual. For me, salvation, being saved from whatever sinful horrors or damnation there is a communal act that is only accomplished through the liberation of people who have been oppressed. That's what faith is for me. Okay? It ain't about just confessing with your mouth and believing in your heart, something that you recite that can't nobody prove and is between you and God. Now, I do believe that your spiritual practice are between you and God, but I also believe that God requires and desires for us to be in community with people. There's passages in the Bible that talk about this. No man is an island. Ain't nobody an island. God created us in community. You didn't get here by yourself. You had a mama and a daddy. Okay? So for me, whatever salvation is, it has to come through the manifestation of liberation of a community, of God's community, God's people. This individual stuff. That is so Eurocentric to me. It's so white to me. It's the white Jesus to me. Where when I see Jesus in the New Testament, when I see Jesus of Nazareth, I see him working to empower and liberate people who were oppressed in his community. So, CJ, that's the snapshot of it. The fact is this: 95 to 99% of what you hear and see coming out of black churches in the 21st century is some rift or rendition of white Jesus. About 95 to 99% of what you see coming out of black churches is some rift or rendition of white Jesus. We have been indoctrinated with, contaminated by, dare I say in the age of COVID-19, infected by white evangelical theology, which is so closely aligned with white supremacy that we can't tell them apart. So, I thank y'all for checking in to this. Thank you, CG, for those questions. I'm trying. Hey, Carlos, and appreciate that, Freeman. You crazy. I'm just talking about what I'm talking about, right? For me, for the church that I pastor, or at least as much as I can inform and empower my parishioners who I pastor. You know, my aim and my scope is for us to be collectively liberated. I believe that there is salvation in that divine salvation. Like I talked Sunday. If y'all hadn't checked out our Sunday service, please check it out. And check out this Sunday's service, right? But last Sunday I talked about how even in resurrection, Jesus did not get resurrected alone. Jesus didn't die by himself. He was not resurrected by himself. He was resurrected in a community of people. Even before he was buried, when he got crucified, other people, the tombs opened and people who were dead were resurrected. So for me, and I think this is a reasonable thing. I'd love to talk this through with anybody when we talk. Oh, hey, Pastor Greg Merriweather. I'm trying to talk about it, baby. For me, what God is after is not some individualized salvation. That's white theology. Individual salvation, your individual healing, your individual breakthrough, your individual increase, your next level, all of this, that stuff is, look, and how is it preaching right? How is that going? How's that going in the age of COVID-19? How's sow your seed and get your breakthrough going? Huh? How's that working out for you? Okay? Probably not so much, because now we're in a space where our theology has to take into account the social and political realities. I've been saying for years, if our theology doesn't take into account the social and political reality, our theology is irrelevant. Now here we are talking all of this Jesus talk, but the question that God will ask, the question that God is asking is, what does that have to do with the liberation of the people? So don't think for a second when I'm out here advocating that we put more economic and medical resources in communities where black folks are disproportionately being impacted by health disparities that I ain't talking theology. You damn right I'm talking theology. I'm talking good theology. I'm talking black liberation theology. I'm talking womanist theology. Hello. So that's the type of religious association I want to have. That's the type of religious conviction I have and what I try to live out. Look, thank y'all for these wonderful questions, and I am excited about and looking forward to having more discussion in the weeks to come. Mark your calendar. Every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time until further notice. We'll be gathering in this space for this type of discussion, and I am extremely honored and excited and appreciative for all of you who have chimed in. All of the questions, all of the comments. Again, I'll try to go back through and see if I can find a couple of those bad boys and share them again with y'all. But again, don't forget, join us this Sunday at 10 a.m. At 10 a.m., we'll be going live. Matter of fact, you should probably log on about 9:55. And we hope that you would connect with Abyssinian. Until next time, brothers, sisters, friends, and kin, it has been real. It's been an honor, and I'll see y'all soon. Peace.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey man, you know though, man, you know what it is. That right. Yeah. Driven by music and tea. Like it. Yeah. Like it. Yeah. Like it. Yeah. I was feeling suicidal, looking for the answers, couldn't find them in the Bible.